So the principles are for me something that is just central in permaculture thinking. Now, the thing is that the principles sit firmly on top of the ethics. And I want to say this because I think it's really important because if you just take one of the principles by itself without the foundation of the ethics, it could be a bit weird. Let me give you an example. So if you go obtain a yield without the ethical framework of earth care, people care, fair share, it could be seen as an extractive thing. Whereas really what it's talking about is, how you can be, if you're creating a garden, right, really think about how it can be something that nourishes you and feeds you back. And so there's that kind of reciprocity going on. So, it's the frame of the ethical foundation that situates these principles in a way that makes a whole lot of sense. So always keep that in mind. So always have that earth care, people care, fair share as your big container, and then the principles sit within that as the core tools, your toolkit, because the principles are really articulated as something that's been evolved from the principles of nature. Like, how does nature work? And these are the principles how we can work with nature. And they're also really just about how we can be very grounded and very practical. So it gives us a language to use, and it gives us a language that we can talk with people around the world, and we can understand one another. But it takes time to get into them. You might think you get it, and then you come around a year later and go, "Oh, I understand that completely differently now because I've had a new experience or a new perspective." So essentially, the principles are really what David Holmgren talks about is you can't just take one out and go, okay, I'm going to apply permaculture principle one, and now I'm doing permaculture. All the principles together are all different dimensions, all different lenses of how to approach holistic design. And they each give us a portal to look into how we can do that. So I really do encourage you to kind of keep them as a set of 12 as a checklist and always use them as that. He talks it about as like as the spokes of a wheel. You can use whatever, imagery or metaphor that you like. It might be the petals of a flower, or it might be something else that you hold as like a holistic idea, and then from that work with it. So what I like you to do, to really articulate what these thinking tools are, um, just type in the chat uh, what principles you can remember without looking at the principles if you've got them in front of you. Can you remember any of the principles? Just type them, and well, let's see if we can get the 12. And let's see which ones we're missing, because that's interesting. So just open up your chat and start dropping them in. This is not a test, by the way. I'm not judging you whether you get them right or not. I'm just, it's okay. So we've got um, observation, observe and interact. So that's the principle number one, or as Charlie McGee and Brenna Quinlan say, stop, look and listen, like the old school thing, stop, look and listen. It's like really just slow down, take the time to be in relationship with, it could be with the land. It could be with thinking about, what you're doing with your life, if you're applying permaculture principles to your whole life. Or it could be about how you're thinking about running your business or your enterprise. It's like doing that study of like, well, what are the niches that need to be filled? What are the needs that need to be serviced? How is it that I can be of service to that? And really observing and finding a way to interact so we can use the principles there. So we've got to obtain a yield. Yep. So that's one. We've got attain a yield, catch and store energy. Great. So catch and store energy is around, like how can you, save some for later or sink it into your system rather than just flowing off because your site or your business or your life, whatever, there's always energy flowing through. But how can you kind of harness that energy, store some for later, be conservative in the way that you're managing things that come through your space? What else have we got here? Utilizing the margin, says Joanne. So the whole kind of concept of edge. Sometimes it was described in the early days as edge effect. What we see now. So that's actually principle number 11, which is use edges and value the marginal, is how it's written in the David Holmgren principle description there. So that is one. Great. Let's see, what else have we got? Use renewables. Yeah, so using that's described here. Let's get the right wording. How is it used here? Use and value renewable resources and services. So that's definitely one. So really looking at, if you can have a chicken to spread out the manure instead of a machine in a farm, like how can you employ things or engage things or invite different natural living systems to engage in the things that they do naturally rather than trying to mechanize things. Like how can we really bring in those natural processes and amplify those? Slow and small solutions, yes. So, like, how can we really just keep it simple? Like, sometimes we try and overcomplicate things and, get too many things all trying to happen. But what is the simplest and lowest impact way where we can have that really graceful way of how Bill Mollison used to talk about, how you can create the least change for the greatest possible effect. So this graceful way of doing it. Um, yeah, no such thing as waste. Oh, you've really got the Charlie McGee thing going on here. It's so helpful, isn't it? Like no such thing as waste. Da, 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 da. That's why he sung the songs. It was to help him to learn it, and it helps everyone else to learn them as well. So no, so the principle that how that's described in the David Holmgren one is um, produce no waste. And so really, when you hear that, it's like, oh my gosh, but it's so hard to do produce no waste. So let's not get caught on that thing of like do no waste, like it's like the impulse, the the kind of the way that we want to move forward, our intention is that we're finding ways to create those circular systems so that we notice, we're observing and interacting where we see that there is some waste happening and we find a way to weave it back into the system again. And of course, you're not going to catch them all in the first go. Of course, you're not. So, sometimes people can be really hard on themselves and go, I haven't got it yet. I'm not any good at this, or I'm just a beginner. But we're all just in wherever we are with this. And so like that I think is a really important thing to keep in mind with lots of things, actually. Um, yeah, looking at nature's patterns. Thanks, Joanne. That's another one. So the way that that's described in the book is designed from patterns to details. So, what that's encouraging to do to, instead of going straight for like, thinking about, okay, well, I'd like to create a vegetable garden. So I'll go and buy my vegetable seedlings and build a bed. Like thinking about, well, where do they go in relation to the sun and to the water, and how does the water flow go, and how am I going to build the soil? So you design from the patterns of the flow of energy and sun, and then you get to the details rather than going for the details first and going, oh, but I didn't notice that I need a windbreak, or I didn't notice that I did that. So starting getting the broader pattern, and that's why we start with things like sector mapping, noticing where the winds are coming from, where the water's flowing. And then we start to move into, like the zoning, and we start to notice our flows and our movement through. So that's that step-by-step process that I try and walk you through in the course, is trying to encourage you to go from that patterns to details. And then we get into designing your garden, but only after you've looked at all the patterns. So you're doing that anyway. If you follow the step-by-step process in the course, you'll be guided through that. Yes, Doris, creatively use and respond to change. So that's principle number 12. And so really that's just trying to encourage us to get creative, to not get stuck in, a situation where we, just put the same old response all the time. Like sometimes we get stuck in a groove, or like a broken record. We just keep stamping out the same solutions. And we know that saying around, you can't solve the world's problems using the thinking that got us there in the first place. We need to really start to think, with all of our creative being, and perhaps collectively creative beings, and start to imagine what's possible. And that change is always going to happen is the other part of that. That like to recognize that things are going to change. It's not like you're going to get a really great design and you're saying that, Joanne, I think I'm going to do that, and then I get it going, and then I think, no, I'm not going to. So you're constantly in that dance, and it is a forever dance. There's never like an end where you go, right, that's it. It's never going to change now. I was just in this beautiful couple's garden in Western Australia. He's 80 and she must be in her 70s. And they were telling me about how their trees walk. Well, they walk their trees because they have a half an acre block, just over half an acre. It's like a little old style suburban block that had a small house with a big yard, designed so people can have, lots of food growing. And they have over 200 varieties of fruit trees in this backyard, and hundreds of varieties of different herbs and plants and things. And they're constantly trying to manage how they can capture the light and move things around. And it's this wonderland. I did over an hour of filming there. I'm going to try and edit it all and share it with you because it's so magnificent. But sometimes they would actually, say, this is just not working. This tree's not thriving here, or it's affecting something else. And so they'd actually go, we've made a mistake. We actually need to redesign this. And they would they've worked out how they can dig up some of these trees and move them around. I mean, you only do that if you absolutely have to, but they're just constantly in relationship with it and constantly in a dance with their garden, and they love it. He was so excited, and she was too, just showing us around there. All right, what else have we got here? Hello, Fred. I noticed you've arrived too. We're talking about principles. Value diversity. So, yes, I mean, gosh, we are in a, a diversity catastrophe at the moment. Like we are having an insect apocalypse, species diversity, are collapsing, habitats are collapsing. We need to create, and I don't know if any of you got a chance to listen to Mary Reynolds at the festival. If you didn't, I would highly encourage you to go and have a listen to her talk. She's started something called We Are the Ark. So we are the acts of restorative kindness. And so she's encouraging people to create that each of your gardens, wherever you are, is an ark. There's an ark of biodiversity. And so that garden by garden, patch by patch, we are restoring the biodiversity. But that's one side of thinking about diversity, but the other is thinking about how we don't just put all our eggs in one basket, as the saying goes. For example, if you're thinking about how to become water resilient, what are the diverse ways that you can actually solve that? So if you're thinking, okay, the first one would be making sure that I've got the water soaked into the ground. I want the soil to be soaked. So what strategies do I need to do with that? I might have some ponds in the ground. I might want to be doing some aquaculture. I might want to have some storage tanks. I have multiple dimensions. I may have multiple water tanks because if one gets contaminated, I've got another. So this idea of going, okay, I need to catch and store energy. I need to catch and store energy. I need to catch and store water. But don't just have one way that you do that. So this is where you can start to see that you start if you put water in the middle of your conversation, and then you use all the different principles to think about how you can address that water. And sometimes I think this is a really useful thing to do, is to maybe in a mind map, like pop a question or a theme like that you're wanting to explore. It's like, how can I address water on my site? And then you ask all the principles and see what comes out. And you'll notice that you'll actually start to see some threads of solutions that come up. And you can do that with any question. It could be about a business question. It could be about designing your education program. It could be about designing a school garden. It could be about anything that you want, if you put that question in the middle and use the principles and the ethics to help you to come up with solutions, I think you'll find them really, really valuable in that. Yeah, diversity is definitely such an important one. And how's it written here? I've just got the list down here. Yeah, so use and value diversity. And something I was talking about at the festival as well, because there was a conversation before me about there was an amazing woman talking about all the different insects and that are in her garden and how she is creating space for that. And one of the things that she's on the radio in WA as a garden talkback radio host, and her mission is to try and get people past what she was calling spraytopia, where everyone you see an insect, oh, got to spray it, it's a problem. Instead of trying to take something away, to get rid of something, to go, okay, what is it that I can add? What is that complexity that I can? What is the more diversity that I can add? What eats that? So that's that thing, like, how can you add something else rather than think, oh, I've got to take it away? And so I think, this is where, to be able to observe and interact and to creatively respond to the change, to get curious, to ask the questions, to really look into what problem am I facing and what are the ways that I can think through actually solving this. So I think that is a really important one. Diversity, lots of different ways to chew on the diversity principle. Integrate, not segregate. Thanks, Daff. That's another one. So that's written as, where is it? Integrate rather than segregate is how it's written. So very similar to that. And essentially that is not going, okay, so to have a permaculture system, I'm going to have a compost, a chicken pen, I'm going to have some vegetable gardens, some herbs and some fruit trees. And so, all right, the compost is over there and the chickens are over here and the garden's over here. It's not about the things that you have. Can you all hear me? Because I can kind of, okay, all right. I'm just noticing that I'm a bit sort of, that's all right. As long as you can hear me, that's okay. Um, uh, yeah, so it's not about the things. In English, we're very good at nouns, like we like things. We need to get more into verbs and connections and processes. So, what is the connection between the compost and the vegetable garden? What is the relationship between the compost and the chickens? What is the relationship between the vegetable garden and the chickens? What is the relationship between the chickens, the vegetable gardens, and the compost and the herbs and your house and your water tank? Like, it's the bits between that are the interesting bits where you, as a designer, get to play. There is no one right answer because it's going to be different for every one of you. But asking the questions like, how can I make those threads of connection stronger? How can I add more? How can I weave more threads of connection into this so that the waste that's coming from my chickens becomes food for something else, and the waste from that becomes food for something else. And so you get this eco web that happens, and always noticing, and that's where you bring in that produce no waste principle. Like what's waste for one is food for the next. What's waste for one is food for the next, and just keep adding. And every time you observe and interact and notice more things that are kind of out of whack or not going somewhere or not fitting somehow, you think, oh, how can I add something? How can I add more diversity? Or how can I add more threads of connection to integrate all of these different elements more? And that's the piece of the designer, the creative design thinking, to weave the bits together in a cohesive way. And you're not going to get it right first time. And there is no right. It is a playful process of actually really getting creative with it, thinking it through, having a plan on a piece of paper. Don't try and do your final plan on your piece of paper first. Do working drawings. Go outside, walk it out. I have done gardens where I've, had like little chalk drip coming out the bottom. And so going out and marking it out in the ground, or having stakes and ribbons, or a hose that I've mapped things out so I can do the design on the ground. You might have, if you think about putting in fruit trees or something, you might have a stake with the name of the fruit tree, and then you might think, okay, well, I'm going to have a bed around that. So if you really want to check it on the ground, you could do that. And then, someone was talking about it. Oh, Joanne, you were also talking about, well, like lots of rain. Get out when it's raining. Like, I always know where to find my husband when it's raining. He's out in the garden with a shovel. And he's looking for where the water is kind of found its way to run off the slope, and he's finding a way to get back on the slope. And and it's a constant iterative process because the soil moves, the landscape moves, a rain might be heavier and start washing things. And so being out there and designing when there's an event happening or when there's been a shift or change. So that's that creatively respond to change piece. And so really, you know, together, all of these principles are a really positive and practical way to be in a state of problem solving all the time, being really practical. And yeah, it's a way of thinking. Blair said, take feedback. Yes, that's number 4 principle. That's the apply self-regulation and accept feedback. And so that's the thing, like that's that bit of when you do that design. And if you sit there and go, right, I've done that now and it's all good, tick, I've got it. And then something goes wrong. It's like, of course it's going to change. Of course there's going to be something that you're going to have to adapt and creatively respond to. And so that's that part of like, check yourself, check in and go, oh, perhaps I could have thought that differently. Maybe if I just have a look at the principles again, or perhaps I might invite a friend over I know who's like really good on that topic and we can have a chat through it. So don't feel like it's always just has to be you as the designer as well, like, or bring your family into the conversation. And that's part of that accepting feedback as well. Go out with your design ideas and say, hey, everyone, what do you think about this? And they might just say, Daff, I hate it. Like, that is so not what I was thinking about having in my garden. And, or they might say, I absolutely love it. Or they might say, oh, great. That makes me think about this idea. And so, if, like, it's a really great thing to start a conversation with a design, but don't ever think that it's the design. Like, it's like, I don't know if you've heard that saying of like the map is not the territory. The map is just a representation of what's on the ground. It's not the ground. It's not the design. It's not life. It's just a flat piece of paper with some lines on it representing what's there at a certain point in time. And so that's what a design is too. It's your best effort at a particular time to pull together different ideas and to get you into the process of thinking through principles and how these start to fit together. Yeah, so that is definitely the principles. Let me see if we missed any here. I think we got them all. We got them all. We did get them all. Okay. All right. Um, So, Liz, I'd be interested in doing a video talking through the principles in relation to a business challenge, perhaps a Permaculture Institute has done already. Liz, can you open your mic and tell me what you meant by that? That you'd like to do a video or you'd like a
Yeah,
video
so
to be
I'd like
done?
to I'd like a video to be done to participate in supporting a video to happen to see if anybody out there, with reflecting on the principles and, as running businesses, we come across different types of challenges and just to step that thinking out further to see how we do apply all of that to our everyday lives. Yeah, just talking through that all the 12
Well, maybe we
principles.
could have it as a one of the business tutorials on that thing, on that day where we
That'd be great
focus on
fun.
that. That could be fun, where we do it together.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm. I just thought I'd
because
put it out there, just
yeah,
inspire.
look, I think it's essential that we start to really think about how we can apply these principles
Mm,
in yeah, as you're going through designing your education programs, as you're designing
absolutely.
the structure of the business that you're going to be doing with that, if that's where you're going with it, or perhaps if it's a community organization, how can you apply the principles of permaculture so that there is an alignment that happens in the process that you're using as well as the way that you're living is the way that you're working, and there is cohesiveness that happens there. And
Mm,
it's really fun to play in those in those spaces and to really see what happens. And sometimes really lovely and surprising new ideas come up or confirmation, oh yeah, that's actually working really well. And that's why that feels well. And that's why it flows well, because it is actually deeply informed by, the principles and practices that you see happening in nature and community. So, um,
And I think it
great.
would also be a really beautiful way to, how sometimes we think we have the answer. What would happen if then we had that awareness just to step back and go through that framework?
Yep. And you know what I think is a really good idea too would be, perhaps if you had an idea, I could share how I do it. If anyone else had any ideas, you could come
Mm.
forward and go, okay, let's just hot seat each other and we could learn from how we've each approached it, and we can also give each other feedback on what we think we could do in ways of, adding diversity. So, all of these principles you can look at yourself, but you can do so much more when you look at them together, and you can actually use them as a way of kind of imagining together in your community what could be possible as well. So, it's they're a toolkit. They're a toolkit to help us to think more holistically and more in line with how nature works. So, however you come up with to use it, and if you come up with an interesting way, you find an interesting way to use them in your community, I'd love for you to share that in Hive as well and describe that. You can even leave little video clips. You could jump on to you're on your phone, record. Hi everyone, I've just been thinking about how I've used, the principle diversity in this example, and like share that way too. Like that could be really fun. Let's see if we can model some of that and get that happening. I think that would be really great. I just wanted to go back to a couple of things that um, were mentioned in the first round. One was around, oh yeah, Doris talking about in the site analysis, and what I feel like when you have so much information now, when you look at a site, somehow because you have so much observation that you might be able to start to see solutions just kind of falling out because you would know it so well because you have so much richness and detail. So anyway, I'd like to talk about that a little bit more perhaps and explore that. There was another conversation around pace and look, you know, it's really good to keep a continuity and keep the flow because when you dip in and out, sometimes it's hard to keep the momentum going, and I totally get that. So while I'm really, I love to have this as a flexible open that you can dip in and out of as you like. If you really want to move forward, I would really recommend that you do set yourself a target of saying, okay, like every Friday afternoon, I'm just going to spend an hour doing design or something. Or, like say whatever it is, to set yourself or say, okay, I'm going to give myself 3 weeks and I'll finish all my projects, you know, and just do it. I think, I'm not going to wave a stick at you to make you do it, but if the more consistency that you have to design things, and then you can keep coming to conversations as long as you like. I mean, I love when people come to conversations and part of that. But if you feel like you want to get stuck into it, like perhaps just set yourself a bit of a task. And if you want to have um, me to check in on you and say, "Hi, Blair, how are you going with that?" And I can do that. I can be the wielder of the stick if you like, not a wielder of a stick. I'm not like that. But um, I can tap you on the shoulder and just say, "How's it going?" No judgment at all whether you've done it or not, but just as a gentle encouragement. All right. So that was what I wanted to say about that. And yeah, I did actually want to send us off into breakout rooms just for, say, um, well, let's see, maybe 5 to 7 minutes or so, just to talk about the principles for a bit. So, what I've got in the breakout rooms, I have, you'll see at the top of the breakout room, there'll be 3 principles. So, what I'd like for you to do is to think of an example that you can describe that uses those 3 principles. Because what I think is the the thing to practice is not just saying, oh, I'm doing produce no waste, but how do you describe what you're doing through multiple principles at the same time? And that's when you start to get the integration of the principles as well as the integration of design. So you'll see three principles at the top. So just start to try and think about how you can describe that. Maybe have a go. I've just got three groups, so there should be relatively small groups. And again, there's no right answer. It's a way just to have a go. You'll notice that the I don't have a lot of space at the top of the line to put it all. So what I've got, one group has observe, which means observe and interact, no waste, which means produce no waste, and integrate, which means integrate rather than segregate. The second group is diversity, yield, and patterns to details, and the third group is edge, which is, the use edges and value the marginal, small and slow solutions, and creatively respond to change. All right, so I'm going to open the rooms. You'll go out for 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll come back, and then we'll have a chance just to debrief from that and any final questions as well. All right, here we go. How'd you go with that? Did anything make sense? Did you find a way to get the three together? What happened?
We had a really funny situation in our room. I realized that I met Simone last weekend at a herb awareness event. Isn't that
Ah, how
amazing?
cool is
I live,
that?
that is so cool. Yeah, I was
Ah,
presenting
yeah,
at
that's
the Herb
awesome.
Awareness Festival down in Albion for their 50th anniversary.
Oh, great.
And Simone actually helped me mandolin some carrots for a kimchi. Isn't it amazing? It's a small world.
It is a small world. Oh, that's hilarious. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
And how'd you go with the principles?
very good.
Any questions
Uh,
emerge? Or do you
I
hold
think
any other questions?
Fred also shared some of what he was doing, and he was looking at a in a broader sense. Weren't you, Fred, that you were saying that you were had that bigger picture of community and that you were trying to embody those principles? Fred's with the
Mhm.
Peace Foundation. Did you want to have a crack? Say something?
Um, Not really, because I think Mora knows all about this. But I see this as a great opportunity every time and again to hear from Mora how he's
Mm.
explaining this, and sometimes spicing them much more into detail than in the books and all that. So yeah, but what actually what we are looking at in talking about the 12 principles is the language we are talking, is the work we already working, and I see them as being natural themselves. The principles seem to be nature themselves because once you start the permaculture movement, you realize that this principle automatically calls for another principle to apply. Interesting.
Yeah, there's never just one principle and I think that's the thing. Sometimes when you're working with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, you will see this project, it works with SDG 17 and 15 and 10 or whatever. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I just want you all to be just saying, this is about all principles all the time. And to see that it is actually always about all of them. And in actual fact, with the SDGs, if you know anything about them, like your project is going to be about all of them all the time anyway, because they're all multiple dimensions of it, and there'll be a way that you'll be able to describe them. So what really this is all about is how you can explain the holistic nature of what you're doing and sometimes when you're starting to try and do this systems work, which is what this is, permaculture is systems work. You're doing systems change. You're working at a systemic level to bring about a kind of holistic change into a system. It's hard to describe it because it's kind of like, where do you begin? And this is what the principles really help you to do. And it's a very good tool. If you're trying to maybe give a report, say, Fred or anyone, about the work that you're doing to, say, a government department or an official group about the kind of work you're doing, you could say, like where you could maybe write in a slightly different language that makes sense where you are, but you could say, could say, in the observe and interact, we're doing an assessment needs analysis, and this is what we've learned. Then you could go into, we're really looking at how we can obtain a yield, like how can we create right livelihoods in this place? And these are the things we're doing. So you can use the principles as a way to actually articulate what you're doing as well and explain it to other people, and in a way that gives the wholeness of it. There's, so many different ways. And there's a checklist to go through at the end and just do a mental checklist and think, oh, if something's not quite feeling right, just run yourself through the principles again and think, okay, perhaps I could add a little bit more here, or perhaps I could tweak something here. So, I'm forever just coming back to the principles. And what I think is really good is to sort of start to also, as if you're thinking of doing education work, to be collecting a series of stories of how you describe the principles. So as you're, say, walking through your garden or whatever educational landscape that you're creating or educational center, to be able to describe the principles in action. And you'll see them in lots of different places. You could describe them, perhaps in the animal system, and you'll be able to see all of them there. Or maybe you'll be able to see all of the principles in action in the food forest. Maybe you'll be able to see all the principles in action, how you develop the built in infrastructure or the water systems. And then you can have that meta, like from patterns to details. You can see the way that the principles applied at a meta level right down into the detail level. So there's, have different stories, and depending on who you're explaining it to, you might bring out a different set of descriptions. If you've got a young group coming through, you might think of a different way of you, as if you've got, a group of planners or farmers coming through. You would describe it slightly differently, but I think keeping the lens of the principles keeps you grounded, but always, as I said before, within the context of the ethics, because that helps to keep it in that always going, is this action that is described by this principle also helping to do earth, keep, people, care, and fair share? And I think that really helps us. So I know we're going to talk about your site now, but perhaps, Doris, we could talk about it at a design studio. We could hot seat you and talk about that. Could we do that? Yeah. Okay. Or any other time that you'd like as well. But I just realized we've, got to the top of our hour. I hope it's useful to kind of come around and have a chat around principles. I'd love for you to actually go away from this session and perhaps, put in a quote, like, what is something that you're curious about now, or you're trying to work out now, or as part of your design that you're trying to think about, or is there a curriculum program you're working on, or is there a business question you're working on? And then put the principles around and just do a broad mind mapping, like while it's fresh. Just go ahead and like spend 10 minutes doing that and see what happens. It's a really fabulous tool, and it just help to sort of embed those principles. The more that you write them down, the more that you play with them, the more that they'll become just kind of second nature. And I think that's when you can start to really, as an educator too, be able to communicate what permaculture is about. Because if you've got the principles and the ethics, you can explain pretty much everything. I think, obviously there's lots of different ways and details in different places, but that gives you the wholeness to hold all the other pieces. So it's really important not to just go, okay, well, I've done the principles, tick, that was in module number whatever. They're in every module, and they'll keep coming back around and round and round and round. They're kind of the basket that holds everything else. So it's fun to play with. So great to see you all. And I hope you have a lovely week, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care, everyone. Bye.